Preseason game number 2 in the books for the Sacramento Kings, a 1-point loss to the Portland Trail Blazers, 124-123 on a Caleb Love free throw, where he had missed 3 free throws in a row to get to that point. He also made a tough three late in the game, but he made the final free throw with zero point 0.6 seconds left in the game, and the Trail Blazers win it. Of course, that was a disappointing end of the game, but it's not the result that really matters. Instead, it is the performance from really individual Kings players in certain lineups that were out there. It was pretty much the same this game as it was last game, where the starters and, well, regular rotation plays in the first half. The second half is where things get switched up a little bit. It was similar to last game because Neat Clifford started the second half, but instead of Zach LaVine, it was Keegan Murray going out. Keegan had a left thumb injury, which I don't know the severity of that. Hopefully it's not bad. Hopefully it's something that he can just rest up in the preseason here and be ready for the regular season, because, Neat Clifford started the second half for Keegan, and the Trailblazers immediately went on a 13-0 run. So not all correlated to Keegan not being out there, but it definitely didn't help that Keegan was not out there, and Portland goes on a run after the Kings had a 6-point lead, then 13-0 run. Kings kind of had to fight back into the game the entire time. The young guys did it again and did fight back into the game in that fourth quarter and even took the lead late, but it just was not enough. But now with 2 preseason games under the Kings' belt, now we kind of get an idea of what's legit, or at least, we can see patterns now. Like Zach LaVine, 2 straight good games from him. He's looking amazing. And obviously, 2 games isn't a big sample size anyways, or either, but we see now that he's playing 2 straight good games. His shot making is very good. You also see Malik Monk struggling again. Another game where he's struggling to really create anything offensively. Had a few mid-rangers go down finally, but he's just struggling to create space. You're starting to see these patterns. You're seeing who's performing well, who isn't. And of course, it is just preseason, so guys could turn around once the regular season starts. It's all about these guys getting into a flow right now. So it's better to have a bad game now, like Malik Monk struggling now. It's better for him to struggle now than later. Neat Clifford, it's better for him to figure things out, get in foul trouble now, have some turnovers now, and then perform in the regular season. I thought early on the Kings were playing some solid defense, or at least they were rebounding well. They had 6 early offensive rebounds. Keegan, despite only playing in the first half, had 4 offensive rebounds. Domas had 2 offensive rebounds. You had Cardwell getting in there, Renault in the second half getting in there for the offensive rebounds, but especially in the first quarter, they started out, like I said, 6 offensive rebounds to 0 for the Portland Trailblazers. Now that didn't last. Portland eventually won the offensive rebounding battle 20-12. The Kings really started off with great offensive rebounding, but also great defensive rebounding. But then as the game went on, you really saw the size of Portland take control of the game. And there were just so many instances where the Kings would play solid defense at the rim. And I think early on, you saw really good interior defense by the likes of DeMar Sabonis, Keegan Murray, others as well. And I think throughout the game even, there were tons of moments where there was good interior defense, guys going straight up, forcing tough shots at the rim. But the problem was, especially when it was in transition or when guys had to help on the interior, they would have these good contests, but then it would leave smaller guys to rebound. And that's where Portland's size really hurt the Kings. Because sure, the Kings can match up Sabonis versus Klingon, but if Sabonis is pulled out of position and he's the guy contesting at the rim, or if Keegan's the guy contesting at the rim, now all of a sudden you're leaving DeMar to rebound. You're leaving Schroeder to rebound. You're leaving Keon Ellis to rebound. And that was really the problem, because they're rebounding against the likes of Denny Avdia, of Drew Holiday, of Tumani Kamara, of these big guys. Like Drew Holiday is the smallest guy for Portland in their starting lineup. And he's not the tallest guy, but he's a big, strong guy. And the rest of the guys the Blazers have, they just have so much size on the wing with the likes of Avdia and Kamara and Shaedon Sharpe and Jeremy Grant off the bench. They have so much of that size. And so that's really what proved to be the problem for the Kings, and that's really nothing new. And that's why Keegan is so important and why the Kings struggled so much when he was out. Because sure, Neat Clifford tries to fill that void, but Neek isn't quite as big as Keegan Murray. Neek is a nice player to have as a guy with some size And so he can match up, especially if he is playing the 2 guard. Like, he has good size for a 2 guard and can play that wing position. But if he's forced to play the 3 or the 4, that's when things really become a problem. And so you did see the Kings leaning into, just like they did last game, double big lineups, especially in the second half when they're bringing in the young guys. They're going with Dylan Cardwell. They're going with Maxime Renaud, Dario Saric, Drew Eubanks. Like, they're playing these guys together. But you can still see the glaring need that the Kings have for size on that wing position, and that's what really hurt the Kings. I liked some of what was happening in the first quarter, especially with the interior defense, but also I think everyone was getting involved more than last game. Last game, it felt like a lot of LaVine, a lot of Sabonis, and not a lot of anyone else. Keegan was getting involved as well. In this game, it felt more well-rounded. You saw Schroeder getting into the game early on, which was good to see because he took until the second half of last game to get involved. So it's good to see him finding his flow a little bit. You had DeMar getting involved early on. LaVine and Sabonis were still doing their things. Keegan was getting involved. So everyone was getting involved, and it was a pretty well-balanced attack. LaVine was still leading the way, and it's good to see him. Like, he had a quick 8 points, a couple of threes, one of them off the dribble, one of them off a catch and shoot from a feed from Domas. Domas got deep against Klingon, draws attention. LaVine with some nice off-ball movement. And that's really what we want to see, right? We want to see Sabonis with the ball attracting attention and LaVine moving off the ball. That's where LaVine can thrive, but we just haven't seen enough of that with LaVine on the Kings so far. And so we want to see more of that. We want to see more of him moving off the ball to get open. That's how he can thrive playing off Domantas Sabonis. So that was great to see. LaVine looks like he's absolutely in a flow. He's looking like the same player as last season in terms of the shot making, which is great because last season his shot making was absolutely incredible. If he continues to make shots like that, that's great. I also do think he is a little more into it defensively. He's one of the only players, I would say, who's really taking Doug Christie's words to heart. I do think he's getting after it defensively. He's never going to be a great defender, but I think I'm seeing it a little bit with LaVine, that he is getting after it defensively a little bit. So it was good to see, everyone getting involved offensively. Dennis Schroeder was taking Toumani Camara off the dribble, and he drew a foul on Camara, and Camara is one heck of a defender. So that's impressive. And then he was going up against Drew Holiday, and he had a nice fake on Drew Holiday and then hit a mid-ranger. So he's going up against some of the best perimeter defenders in the entire NBA. Drew Holiday and Toumani Camara are two of the best perimeter defenders in the entire NBA. So the Kings being able to score against this Blazers defense that's anchored by Klingon, that has Drew Holiday and Toumani Camara and Deni Avdija, that's impressive, and that's a good sign for the offense. On the other end, though, the defense was still not great, and most of it really did just come down to size differential, I would say. There were just too many times where you would find Malik Monk having to guard Shaedon Sharpe or Keon Ellis on Deni Avdija. There were just so many mismatches. And I was doing a live stream watch along during this game. Shout out to everyone who joined that. That was fun. And I remember somebody in the live stream chat, they said, Portland's just a bad matchup for the Kings because of the size. And it's like, yeah, they are. But then someone else was like, well, when 90% of the league is a bad matchup because of size, like, that's a problem. And that's really what it seems like with the Kings, where the size is the problem defensively. Doug Christie has these things that he wants from the defense. He wants them to pick up full court. And they weren't necessarily doing that. But he wants this defense to make the other team feel them. But at the end of the day, the Kings just don't have the roster for that. I think that's what you're seeing here. The Kings are going to have to outscore teams. The second quarter is really where the Kings started to struggle in terms of defensive rebounding. Portland was getting a lot of offensive rebounds. They started the second quarter with a lineup of Keon Ellis, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, Isaac Jones, Drew Eubanks. And then they brought in Dario Saric for Isaac Jones. And those lineups were not great. Isaac Jones had another tough game, another tough outing. He wasn't good last game. He wasn't good this game. He struggled to find his spot offensively, wasn't really making an impact defensively, wasn't rebounding the ball like he maybe should have. So they went with Dario Saric. Dario Saric didn't play last game. He played in this one, and he was very good. He was very good because he just simply went 4 for 4 from 3. So when he can be a sniper like that, that's great. But those bench lineups definitely struggled towards the end of the first quarter and start of the second quarter. Like that's when the Kings really started to struggle. I felt like Malik Monk was having a tough time running the offense. He was struggling to get inside and really create space against the length of this Portland team, which is the exact same thing that we saw against Toronto. Portland was the team that was playing how Doug Christie wants to play, pressuring full court, making the Kings feel them. And the Kings bench unit, all the bench units were really struggling with that. And it wasn't until the Kings starters came back in that the Kings started to get back into the game. When the Kings starters came in, started knocking down some threes. Now we didn't really see the threes because of the broadcast we were watching, because it was, we're on these live streams, we're just getting the broadcast of the Jumbotron. Portland's Jumbotron, every time Portland would make a basket, they're replaying it 20 times and having all these graphics, and then we miss a possession or two, which is annoying. But the Kings started to get back into it, hit some threes, started to get after it defensively, and I liked the tempo that the Kings started to play with. Dennis Schroeder pushing the ball up to DeMar DeRozan for a nice easy bucket that got DeMar positioned down low, and he just put, I think it was like Blake Wesley, put him in the torture chamber. Blake Wesley had a pretty good game, but DeMar DeRozan got him on that one. And then Sabonis intercepting a ball and pushing it all the way down the court. And that's when the Kings are at their best, when Sabonis, gets an interception and pushes it down the middle of the court and has shooters on either side of him and can Euro step his way to the basket. That's when the Kings are at their best. And the Kings really just stopped fouling as much. They had foul problems throughout this game, but in that second quarter, they stopped fouling as much. They were staying in front. That was causing turnovers. Zach LaVine caused an illegal screen while guarding Shaedon Sharpe off the ball. That's what I'm talking about when I'm saying, like, LaVine felt like he was getting after it defensively, because he's even, chasing around Shaedon Sharpe off the ball and drawing an illegal screen. But then the Kings went back to the bench lineup a little bit in the second quarter, and it felt like it was Monk over dribbling a bit. And it was interesting, Dennis Schroeder, Malik Monk, Zach LaVine. They were playing together. It's an interesting trio of guards there. Dennis Schroeder started to get his mid-range game going, but then he airballed the three, and Monk was struggling, and LaVine really wasn't getting involved. The defense picked up, but the offense fell off there. And so it felt like a pretty evenly matched game until the very end of the first half, when Keegan kind of took over. He took over just a few possessions to end the game by getting after it on the defensive end, getting a steal, getting a block, and getting an offensive board and one to finish off the half up 6. So I felt like it kind of, the half deserved to be even, but then Keegan was the difference maker at the end of the half. But then Keegan went out with that thumb injury, and at first I thought, oh, they're just doing another Zach LaVine, because they just had Zach LaVine not play the second half last game. I thought that's what they were doing with Keegan. That's not what they were doing. So they had to take him out. Nick Clifford comes in, 13-0 run for the Blazers. Nick, you can see the talent there, but you can also see some of the flaws to his game and see him being sped up in moments where his passes just aren't on point. His handle gets away from him a little bit. He threw a pass off Zach LaVine's face in transition. So things were getting a little sloppy, especially from Nick. And that second half is really when it felt like, or especially the third quarter, it really felt like the Blazers just started to play bully ball, out rebounding the Kings, out muscling the Kings. They just have all of these big wings that are mobile. Jeremy Grant was getting mismatches on Drew Eubanks and just taking him off the dribble, and there's really nothing the Kings could do about it. Thankfully, Dario Saric was still knocking down threes, but you had Denny Avdia just kind of gliding around the Kings with his combination of size and skill, and then he was finding young Hansen, and then it was a Hansen takeover, hitting a couple of threes, just absolutely cooking us inside. Hansen was incredible for a stretch in that third quarter. He ended with 16 points on the game. You can see the skill there. Then towards the end of that third quarter, just like the Kings did last game, they brought in some of the bench players. They brought in Devin Carter. They brought in Dylan Cardwell. So the two DCs, Devin Carter, Dylan Cardwell, came in. And Devin Carter, again, just like last game, he comes in and he immediately sets the tone defensively. And that's what I'm loving about Devin Carter in this preseason. There are still problems to his game, especially his offensive game. But when he comes in defensively, he's going to do what Doug Christie wants. And that's why I feel like he's going to earn minutes. I don't know where in the rotation he's going to fit in, but it just feels like if Doug Christie doesn't give Devin Carter minutes, what kind of message is that sending? Because Doug Christie, he's all about, you got to pick up 94 feet. You got to make the other team feel you. You've got to be giving effort defensively. Devin Carter is the one guy who, without fail, does that every single possession. He came in and immediately drew an offensive foul because he was picking up full court. He's picking up 94 feet. So, I understand that there are these flaws to his game, but you still have to play him because he is the guy who is doing what Doug Christie wants and what Scott Perry wants. There is an identity that they're setting, or they're saying there's this identity, but the only way you're really going to create that identity is if you actually play the players who epitomize that identity. And so I'm loving what Devin Carter has been doing when he comes into these two games, because the effort is never going to be a question with him. Malik Monk finally got it going a little bit towards the end of the third quarter. He's trying to get to this mid-range game, which is not efficient for him, but he did finally knock down a couple. He just can't get any space. The old Malik Monk, before the De'Aaron Fox trade, was able to get downhill and had that pick and roll game with Sabonis. And I feel like we just haven't seen that in so long. Towards the end of the last season, we just weren't seeing that. He wasn't able to create space inside. He just gets stuck on the perimeter and cannot get good shot attempts off. And we're seeing that again here. So that's definitely a worrying sign, because it's not just like he's struggling in these two preseason games, but it's the same thing that we saw him struggle with towards the end of last regular season. So it's not just a preseason thing. But Zach LaVine continued to play well, hit another three. Dario Saric hit a three off a LaVine feed. And you had Dylan Cardwell coming in. And immediately I noticed his rebounding. He was rebounding very well. But he also airballed a mid-range jumper. With Dylan Cardwell, it felt pretty clear he's a great rebounder. And that was something that the Kings needed in this game. It's pretty clear how good of a defender he can be. It's just he needs a few moves offensively to be able to be an NBA player. Because there was a moment where I think it was Devin Carter driving into the paint, and he dishes to Dylan Cardwell kind of near the dunker spot, but a little further out. And nobody's guarding him. There's just a bunch of guys in the paint, and Dylan Cardwell just catches the ball and he can't do anything with it. He needs like a little floater. If he could, imagine giving Dylan Cardwell Rashawn Holmes' push shot. He would be unstoppable, right? That's the type of thing that Dylan Cardwell needs. If he really wants to be an NBA player, he's going to get a ton of time in the G League. Hopefully that's the type of thing he works on. That's the one thing that he needs to do, is just develop a move, develop a little floater. Because we know he can dunk the ball if he gets that opportunity. But he needs to be able to not have guys just sit right below the rim. Another guy who needs to develop a floater, and kind of has, is Devin Carter. He made a couple of floaters, which is nice to see. That's something that he needs as a small player, but he is quick. He's able to get into the lane. He needs that little floater, and he made a couple of them. In the fourth quarter, we saw a lineup of Isaiah Stevens, Devin Carter, Nick Clifford, Dylan Cardwell, and Maxime Renaud. Same lineup that ended last game. Immediately, things didn't go well, and the Blazers got out to a pretty big lead in the first minute and a half of that fourth quarter. Isaiah Stevens was having a horrible time. Airballed a wide open shot, had a turnover. Like, he was just having a bad time. But he turned it around pretty quickly. We also saw Dario Saric get back into the game a little bit. We saw a little bit of Daquan Plowden. And again, that group of young players, plus Dario Saric, plus Daquan Plowden, they were able to get the Kings back in the game. Devin Carter was good, like I said. He was getting to his floater. He was getting into the lane. He was drawing loose ball fouls, doing everything that he needed to do from an effort standpoint. Isaiah Stevens turned it around a little bit, started to get hit to his mid-range. And then we saw a lot of Nick Clifford handling the ball. And it was very mixed results. Like, his handle seemed a little bit loose, and there were definitely turnovers. And it wasn't just turnovers, but his missed opportunities at times. But these are the types of reps that he needs. He was fairly efficient from a scoring perspective. He ended the game on 15 points on 5 for 11 from the field, and definitely had some very nice fines, but it wasn't as perfect as it was last game. Last game against the Raptors, he really took over towards the end of the game. And I did feel most confident when he had the ball, to be fair, down the stretch. I still wanted the Kings to get him the ball because there was a time where, Isaiah Stevens was bringing the ball up the court. It makes sense. He's the point guard. But the Kings couldn't really get into anything because they had Isaiah Stevens bringing the ball up. He was being pressured. Maxime Renaud would get the ball on the perimeter trying to run some DHO. And Nick Clifford was kind of sitting in the corner. And Devin Carter was sitting in the other corner. And the Kings couldn't really get anything. Felt like they needed to get Nick or Devin on the ball a little bit more. But I did like what Nick was doing in terms of his cutting. I thought the timings on his cuts were pretty good. He got an and one off a cut. Also on an inbounds play late when the Kings were down 4 with like 26 seconds. He made a nice cut to the rim. Isaiah Stevens found him under the basket. He also made a nice defensive play late. Neek did, where he jumped the passing lanes. Him and Devin Carter both jumped the same passing lane, but Neek was just in front of Devin. And then Neek just threw it ahead to Devin. And Devin was able to get to the slam, and that was actually to tie it. Then Neek went to the free throw line for the lead. So, it was a mixed bag. Neek had his scoring moments, but he also looked a little bit loose with that handle, like I said. Didn't have the greatest playmaking game. But I think you can see how smart he is. Like there was a moment where he was guarding on ball up top and someone was cutting behind him and he just backs up a little bit to get in the way of that cutter. To get in the way to allow Isaiah Stevens to catch up a little bit. It didn't matter. Isaiah Stevens fouled him anyways. But it's just that type of thing. Like a little thing that tells me that Neek is a smart player. We also saw some good moments from Maxime Renaud in terms of his playmaking. Had some very nice passes. He found Daquan Plowden on a backdoor cut late in the game to get Plowden a crazy and one. That was a great finish from Plowden. He also had a nice drive from the perimeter and then dropped the pass off to Plowden inside. So Max was showing off his playmaking skills. The one thing that I think Max really needed to do better was defensive rebound. There were too many times where the ball is hitting him in the hands on the defensive glass and he's not coming up with it. He needs to be stronger. Did have a really nice putback late in the game on the offensive glass. And I think he can thrive more on the offensive glass than the defensive glass because he can reach over guys. And whereas on the defensive glass, he kind of gets pushed under the rim. On the offensive side, he can reach over guys. He can just be the guy there to clean up if there's nobody putting a body on him. Devin Carter also had a nice play where he tapped an offensive rebound to Nick Clifford inside for a layup late in this one. But then the Kings end up losing this game because they call a foul as Caleb Love drives on Nick Clifford. Nick fouls him, and Caleb Love was able to hit one of 2 free throws to win the game. And that was something that Nick struggled with was the foul trouble. And I think it's just because he struggles to stay in front of guys. And that was something that I kind of anticipated was going to happen. And I think that's normal for a rookie like him. And it's just about his growth there. That's not something that I'm like worried about because he's not able to stay in front of guys or he's fouling them too much. That's just something that he needs to improve on. And so if he doesn't show improvement throughout the season, then maybe you can be worried about it, but it's not something that I'm worried about right now. But let's go through each player and I'll just say like 1 or 2 things about their game, or maybe more if it's one of the young guys that I noticed. Domantas Sabonis, the 3-point shot is not there. He's got the quick release and he's really trying it. He's missing badly on every single one. He's also struggling with foul trouble a little bit. Keegan, the injury, hopefully it's not serious. He's too important to this team. Zach LaVine, the defensive effort was there and the offensive shot making is very much still there. Keon Ellis, why didn't he get a lot of minutes? He only played 8 minutes. He just didn't play a lot, and I'm worried that he's not going to play a lot in the regular season. So that's definitely worrying. DeMar just felt like he wasn't even really in the offense that much, had a little bit early on, but it kind of felt like he fell out of the flow of the offense a little bit and then is not doing much defensively. So not a great game from him. Dennis Schroeder, was nice to see him getting into his mid-range a little bit and scorching some pretty great defenders. So it's good to see a little bit more out of him than the first game. Nick Clifford, obviously I talked about him a ton. The foul trouble, the staying in front of guys, shaky handle, but he's getting good on-ball reps, had a fairly efficient scoring night. So overall, I'm happy with what we're seeing from Nick. Malik Monk, struggling to get where he wants on the floor. Struggling to get inside, just really struggling with the size and length of these defensive players. Isaac Jones really just struggled with everything, missed his 1 3-point attempt, missed inside as well. He drew a foul inside, but wasn't making an impact defensively, just not making the impact that you want to see him making. Drew Eubanks had another pretty solid outing. He ended with 11 points on 3 for 5 from the field, 5 for 6 from the free throw line with 3 rebounds in there. A fairly solid outing. Saw him go into that hook shot a little bit. So I think he is earning that backup 5 spot. Maxime Renaud, good passing, but needs to be a better defensive rebounder and find ways to score without it just being cleaning up on the glass. And that might come with just having a better point guard playing with him. Devin Carter, great effort. So many great effort plays. Also had the headband on. If you know, you know. Doug McDermott didn't play. Terrence Davis didn't play. Dylan Cardwell, like I said before, just needs to add a little bit to his offensive game. Needs a floater. Get a floater. If he gets even a little bit of a floater, like the jump shot, I don't think it's ever going to be there. The free throw looks awful. The mid-ranger looks awful. Just if he can get a little floater, he can become valuable. Dario Saric, first game action here, 4 for 4 from 3. Great. Isaiah Stevens shrugging off a slow start and getting to his spots in the mid-range, but I think the size really is just going to be the big problem for him. And then Daquan Plowden, good cutter. That's what I noticed from this game. He was finding himself in good spots on good timings in the paint where others were finding him. A couple of last notes. The Kings' leading rebounder was Keegan Murray with 5 rebounds. That's not a good thing, right? The guy that played only one half. I get it's preseason, so the minutes are all over the place, but the guy only playing in the first half should not lead the team in rebounding. Maxime Renaud led the team in assists with 4. So, I don't know. That was pretty cool. The Kings now play on Wednesday against the Clippers and Friday against the Lakers. I want to see Malik Monk have a good game. I want to see him be able to get to his spots, get inside, create for his big men inside. Also want to see him get some catch and shoot 3 attempts because it feels like the Kings are not generating a ton of good 3-point looks. They don't have a ton of great shooters. Keegan has been missing. LaVine's really been the only guy there that's really been knocking them down. Hoping to see more from Isaac Jones. I was hoping that he would get into the game in the fourth quarter because they took him out so early in the rest of the game and he wasn't playing well. Hopefully he can get some positive minutes going forward. And then I'm just looking for more on-ball reps from the likes of Nick Clifford, more reps from the likes of Maxime Renaud and Devin Carter as well. I think all of those guys have shown flashes of what they can do with the ball, especially from a playmaking standpoint. And so I just want to see more of it from those guys. Anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. Shout out to all you guys who were there in the live stream. That was fun. Anyone who stopped by, gave a lurk, didn't even have to be in chat. If you just stopped by, I appreciate it. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.